El Tomistoma es una especie muy, a veces se le llama falso gavial por tener el hocico alargado también, o la boca alargada, pero varía mucho, o sea, depende del ángulo donde se tome la fotografía, o depende, realmente no sabemos qué no se ha descubierto, porque en algunos casos la boca o el hocico es un poco más ancho, en otros casos es más angosto, la distribución de los dientes es totalmente diferente. Bienvenidos de nuevo, estimados seguidores de Cocodrilos del Mundo por la plataforma de YouTube, canal de Río Verde. Aquellos nuevos observadores de estos episodios, los invitamos a que se suscriban, le den like a nuestros programas y recibirán la campanita de todos los episodios nuevos que están saliendo normalmente los sábados 8 de la mañana, hora de Venezuela. Hoy tendremos el placer de hablar de una especie que realmente llama mucho la atención, mucha gente no la conoce. Inclusive dentro de los biólogos es una especie que, como se encuentra en peligro de extinción, son muy pocos los reportes de vida silvestre que se tiene de esta especie. Se encuentra exclusivamente en el sureste asiático, en Sumatra, Indonesia, Malasia, esas islas de esta área del planeta. Nos referimos al Tomistoma schlegelii. En español Tomistoma, en inglés se dice Tomistoma, que suena bien bonito. Y vamos a conversar con un gran amigo mío que se llama Kyle Chaney. Él es profesor de la Universidad de Texas A&M en Texas. Actualmente también está haciendo una pasantía de un año en una institución en la ciudad de Washington, D.C., y tiene aproximadamente unos 10 años trabajando con el Tomistoma, principalmente en Indonesia y en Sumatra. Él nos va a contar en qué situación se encuentra la especie, cómo está trabajando con estudiantes en esos países y cuáles son los objetivos que tiene este proyecto en particular. Ok, estimados seguidores de Cocodrilos del Mundo, en esta oportunidad tengo el gusto y el honor de hablar con Kyle Chaney. Kyle es profesor del Departamento de Biología y creo que se traduce algo así como Ciencias Humanas o de Salud de Texas A&M University, y me acaba de comentar que está ahorita en un año especial en una fundación en Washington, D.C. Kyle tiene unas páginas web donde habla de todo el trabajo que ha hecho alrededor del mundo en su amplia experiencia, aunque es un individuo bastante joven, mucho más joven que yo. Pero está involucrado mucho en la conservación del Tomistoma schlegelii, que es una de las especies de cocodrilos en peligro de extinción y más raramente vistas en la naturaleza. Entonces, bien, welcome, Kyle. Please, you can talk to our audience. What are you doing with the species in what country are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you so much. It's great to be here and talk with you and have this opportunity. You know, like you said, Tomistoma, the Sundagarial, Senulong, depending on which name you want to use, it's such a rare species and such a unique species. And we started working with them around 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years this year. And we've been focused mostly in the country of Indonesia, but their range extends into a few other areas as well, into peninsular Malaysia and into Malaysian Borneo, and what's referred to as the Greater Sunda region, so the western side of the Indonesian archipelago. And would you prefer that I share currently what we have going on, or do you want me to jump back to where we started and go from there?
Okay. But tell me exactly what are you doing with the species in that part of the world?
Well, when when we got started, it was mostly population surveys and really just trying to identify what the status of the species is in the wild. And we focused most of our efforts on the island of Sumatra. We visited three main areas: the Burback National Park area, the Morong River, and the Kampar River system when we first started doing those initial surveys. And we were very excited when we found Tomistoma in two different river systems. We confirmed that they were still in the Burback National Park area in the Air Hitam Laut river system, and then also in the Kampar River. And we've went ahead with that project, and we've started to do other things. I hired a master's student, Herdanu Jayanto, and he's from Indonesia. And he started to go out for his master's thesis and capture and tag large male Tomistoma with satellite tracking devices. And so what we've been trying to identify with that research is we really to understand their movement ecology better. How are those animals moving across the landscape? How much space do they require? Where do they go? And why do they do certain things, so that we could have a better picture for what needs to be done for conservation. And so Danu has gone out and captured several of those Tomistoma so far for that project.
Because some people say that one of the recognition of the word that you talked a few seconds ago is that you are reporting that new wild population in this area. That's the point, no?
So the area where Danu is working, it's not a new population that we're reporting on, but actually, you could say that we knew about the presence of those animals there for many decades. A person named Marc Bajuan went and did some initial survey work there in the late 1990s, early 2000s. He was working with Charlie Manolis, Graham Webb, several other folks, and did some of the really early survey work there. And he identified that there was a population, but we knew very little about those animals and how they were behaving, how were they using the unique peat swamp forests that they live in. They live in these beautiful blackwater peat swamps, very unique. All the plant life there is completely unique, flooded forests. All the animals there are also unique. And so really we knew the population was there, it was present, but we knew nothing about their behavior.
Okay, and if I understand well, it's the first time that we can take more information or knowledge about the ecology and the biology of the species, like that.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
one of the things that for many years I asked, why, or probably I don't know, is some conservation program about ranching to raise some animals in captivity and reintroduce it to the wildlife?
So I am not sure what happened with some of those programs, and I'm not aware of any that are still ongoing, although there might be some attempts across Indonesia that are happening off the radar that I'm not sure about. But there has been discussions between specialists about reintroducing animals to different areas. The problem is we know so little about Tomistoma in the wild that it's a little bit early, in my opinion, to just go out and start releasing animals.
Okay.
I think that there's definitely a need for that in some places, but we need more information. We need more science to understand where we should be putting those animals, where we should reintroduce them in the wild. And also, there's some issues with a lot of habitat destruction and habitat loss for a variety of different reasons. And so just run out and reintroduce animals, there's a chance that their survival probability is very low. So it could be wasted effort if there's not a lot of planning.
Okay, you say something important. Probably one of the most important reasons that the species are declining in the last year is the habitat restriction or lost the habitat. But
Yes.
is the only reason, because we know very well that the species is not available. It's not about, no, it's not the word. We don't never use it for the skin market or international skin market. And I don't know is where the species are, the local community eating them.
Yeah, so two really good questions there. Like you said, their skin is not considered high quality.
Yeah.
And so they really haven't, at least not in a major commercial way, they've never seriously been harvested for leather the way that Crocodylus porosus, the saltwater crocodile, has been. Although some poaching does occur, it seems like, based on, and this is based on my experiences traveling to these places in Sumatra and talking with local people, it seems like it's more of a fishermen will take advantage sometimes to try and sell a skin here or there, but it's not in any serious commercial sense. And then sometimes they might try and catch the small hatchlings and sell those for pets in illegal pet markets. I spent a lot of time in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, visiting those illegal wildlife markets, looking to see if people were selling those small Tomistoma. They become very secretive when you walk around asking about those kinds of things. So I know it happens, but how often, how many of these Tomistoma are being sold illegally in those markets, I don't know. We don't have the data, but it does happen sometimes. So you have habitat loss, some poaching that occurs, and then various other activities or other processes that could impact Tomistoma. Things like competition from saltwater crocodiles could be another factor at play, because saltwater crocodile populations are booming right now in Indonesia. They're expanding into many areas where they could potentially have an impact on Tomistoma because of competition between the species.
It's very important and very important point. And what is the feeling of the local community about the species? They have some believe it that is something magic, or believe that it's a dangerous species because eating the animals in the farms or something like that. What is the feeling of the local community where in the area where you found Tomistoma population, in the wild?
Yeah, it's a great question. In my experience, most of the communities up and down the east coast of Sumatra where I worked, and we're talking about fishing communities, they live their lives on the water, they're in canoes every day, so they see these animals often. They had a very positive perception of Tomistoma, and many of them were very afraid of saltwater crocodiles, rightfully so, because saltwater crocodiles are very dangerous. Their perception of Tomistoma was quite different, and they looked at them positively. We've seen a rise in Tomistoma attacks on people in the last 10 to 15 years, which is something considered very uncharacteristic for that species.
And this attack, what is the reason that happened? Because I understand when you talk about the saltwater crocodile that is very aggressive, no?
Yes.
And but with Tomistoma, I can understand. I don't see. Well, I only see in South of Asia. I never see in the wild. But I think it's very quiet species. Probably the accidents is because the local people go into the river or are cleaning the clothes in the border of the river, or I don't know. It's it's not because it's typical that you say that Tomistoma are aggressive species.
Yeah, so, and I agree with you. It's another great question. Um, I I don't know the exact reason why it's happening yet. I think we're still trying to understand that. But to be clear, it's not nearly as often as saltwater crocodiles. You know, the number of attacks on people are much lower from Tomistoma than from saltwater crocodiles. So the issue is not nearly as severe. And it could be accidental. It could be mistakes that happen sometimes. And like you said, when people are going down to clean their clothes or when they're out fishing, there could be things that happen that are mistaken identity. Maybe Tomistoma are seeing them as another food option. But it's important to remember that Tomistoma, especially the large males, they grow up to over 5 meters in length. And that is a very large crocodilian. And when they get bigger, you know, initially, when you look at a small Tomistoma, they have that narrow snout, right? And they have those very small teeth, and everything about that dentition, about those teeth, it screams at you, that's a fish eater, right? Why would they go after a big vertebrate, a big primate, or some kind of ungulate, some kind of deer or something like that? But something happens with those big males when they get bigger, and their skull morphology becomes much more robust. And if you look at the skull, and I have some pictures on my website that I can share later, their skull and their teeth change a lot. And their teeth are about the size of my thumb, and not designed for just fish eating anymore, right? So they're obviously very capable of eating big vertebrates, and it may be that they have always been occasionally involved with attacks on humans. We just didn't know about it because they live in such remote, wild places.
Yeah, you say something very important, Kyle, because if I review my pictures, you are completely right. The small Tomistoma, the mouth with you know, is very
Yes.
thin. It's like gavial, more
Yes.
like. But when they grow, I saw some animal that the mouth is more weight, or and the distribution of the teeth is completely different. I think sometimes that the expression of the genetic in the species is so high because it's completely different in some individuals. No, and it's very interesting study that like that. I don't know. Some genetics study are doing with the species, or is for the moment is very difficult.
Yeah, so actually, we are currently trying to get a project going looking at the genetics of Tomistoma. And that's a collaborative project with Matt Shirley,
Okay.
Kent Vliet, and Chris Murray. And the idea with that is, you know, if you look at a range map, the geography of where Tomistoma live, they live on the island of Borneo, the island of Sumatra, and peninsular Malaysia. And maybe they were on Java. That's debated, right? But across different islands, and their range is separated by ocean.
Yep.
The question is, how long have they been isolated from each other on these different islands? Because we know that during the last ice age, around 11,000, 12,000 years ago, that ocean was much lower because a lot of water was locked up in ice caps. And all of that was connected. all of that by a shallow seafloor. And so it's possible that it's only been 12,000 years, which means there's some genetic diversity there, right? But maybe not enough to really have given enough time for major differences. But it's possible that they've been isolated from each other for much longer. And if we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years or even millions of years, there could be some really different Tomistoma populations out there. It would mean maybe different subspecies or potentially even different species of Tomistoma that we simply haven't identified yet. So our goal with the genetic study is to collect samples from across their range and then compare those and create a family tree for those different populations and really identify how different are they. But it would be very exciting to see if you have anything that's really unique in there.
And another important point, I remember 20 years ago a conversation with John Hutton, and he say, and he published a paper with Grant Webb, when they say that the species of crocodile species that don't have a commercial interest, it's very difficult to obtain funds for research in the wild. And you are agreeing with this point, Kyle?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and another point to finalize this small conversation, what happened with the Tomistoma task force group in the crocodile specialist group? Because I remember 20 years ago, I don't know, 20 or 15 years ago, this task force is increasing people. Our good friend that passed away many years ago, Ralph Summerland was involved, Bruce Seawick, Colin Stevenson, many people are involved in this task force. But Bruce said me a few days ago that the group is finished the activity into the CSG, but is continue working outside the CSG?
Yeah, so interesting question. I think that some of the history there and some of exactly what happened to the group, it would be better for Bruce Schwedick and Colin Stevenson to answer. Because I know, they've been involved with the group much longer than I was. I really came in later on, and I wasn't aware of all the reasons why Tomistoma Task Force went away. I think there was potentially something to do with how much involvement there was. There might not have been enough activity going on. But I would leave that for Bruce and Colin to confirm exactly what the reasons were.
Okay. Well, Kyle, I think it's a very nice conversation. To finalize this, you wanna say something more to finalize our conversation?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. This project that I mentioned with Herdanu Jayanto, and then also some of the earlier work that I did there. I think that goes back about 10 years. I think there's a couple of interesting things from that as well. I guess I'll start with the earlier work. So when I started in 2014, I was still a graduate student at the time, and I was basically surveying up and down the coast of Sumatra and those different areas that I mentioned. And some of those places, when you would look at satellite images of those regions, you would see these big dark green patches of forest where it was still untouched. Right, there had been no roads cut in, there were no agricultural plantations, and still they were very wild and potentially good refugia for Tomistoma to hide out in some of those blackwater peat swamps. And some of that is still there today, but some of that is going away. It's disappearing. Just within a decade, I've seen the Kampar River area really change a lot. And I've seen a lot of the forest patches. If you look at satellite images from 10 years ago versus today, a lot of the forest is completely gone. And some of those areas were just pristine rainforests. You know, I don't even, it'd be hard for me to go back and look today to see some of it gone because it was just thriving. So you've still got a lot of issues in terms of places where Tomistoma populations still occur, but their habitat is disappearing fast. And then you've got some really interesting places where certain national parks and reserves have done a great job of conserving Tomistoma habitat. And one of those is Burback National Park, where Danu has been doing his work and where he caught 5 large males. The largest male that he caught was 4.7 meters in length. So just shy of 16 feet, I think, for those folks in the US. And when you look at images of those, and I think you're going to meet with Danu separately, those are really impressive Tomistoma. Just they're amazing how big those animals are. But that's just the very beginning of a longer term project that we're trying to keep going. And hopefully here in the next few weeks, Danu will be back in the field and doing another capture and tagging session. So we're hoping to get another 4 Tomistoma captured this September in Burback National Park. And then we can learn more about where they're going and what kinds of movements they're making. And those satellite tags that Danu's putting on those animals, they link up directly with Iridium satellites. And when we get a good connection, it sends that data right to our computer. And so from right in the US or Venezuela or wherever somebody would be, you can see where those animals are moving, right? So it's pretty exciting. And I think just a couple other things to mention are the other individuals that have been helping us out with this work over the course of the last 10 years. Amir Hamidi is a collaborator over at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. It's now referred to as BRIN. He's based just outside of Jakarta. He's been just incredibly helpful for the last 10 years in making these things happen. And basically none of this could have happened without Amir. Evi Arita has been also very helpful. She accompanied me in the field to the Kampar River area on one occasion. We had an undergraduate assistant named Aisha Rimbi that helped us out during some of that early work. And then some of the local people that have helped us out are really some of the most valuable assets to this entire thing. There's a couple of local people named Cosno and Sismanto. They work in Burback National Park. They've been guiding me and guiding Danu. And Sismanto even guided Mark Bajuan back in the late 1990s or early 2000s, over 20 years ago. So that gives you an idea of how important these local communities are in assisting with all these conservation efforts, assisting with these scientific endeavors. It basically wouldn't exist without them, right? So these locals are amazing, and I would argue some of the best experts in the world on the species, because they've lived their lives interacting with Tomistoma. They understand their ecology in a way that many scientists don't understand because they're just studying papers or books, whereas these locals are out there in canoes and they're finding Tomistoma nests, they're finding Tomistoma individuals, you know, they're seeing their behavior. And so I see them as experts, and I see them as critical to making all these things happen. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, you are right. I totally agree with you, Kyle. It's very important all the new research and the collaboration for say something or involved in the big project because I understand it's a big project with the local researchers and in private or NGO institution or university in southwest of Asia. No?
Yeah.
Well, Carl, thank you very much for your attention and good luck in your research.
Thank you. And can I just follow up with one more thank you message? There's a few folks that I didn't get a chance to mention, but all of the funding sources for this, we've had assistance from several zoos, Zoo Dresden, Virginia Aquarium, Crocodile Specialist Group. It was the Tomistoma Task Force that was helping us out at the time, National Geographic, and also some of the folks that have helped out with this. Sally Isberg has helped out immensely. Sergio Balaguera Reina is another collaborator that helped out with Danu. Just a ton of folks that have helped out with this, and I really appreciate it. So, and thank you, Alvaro. It's great to see you again. I don't think I've seen you since Chetumal, so it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah. Next year, in 2 years in Morocco, probably we met.
Yes, absolutely.
Como pudieron ver en esta agradable conservación con Caio, el Tomistoma es una especie muy, a veces se le llama falso gavial por tener el hocico alargado también, o la boca alargada, pero varía mucho, o sea, depende del ángulo donde se tome la fotografía, o depende, realmente no sabemos qué no se ha descubierto, porque en algunos casos la boca o el hocico es un poco más ancho, en otros casos es más angosto, la distribución de los dientes es totalmente diferente, como van a ver y como observaron en las diferentes fotografías o videos que les estamos mostrando en este episodio. Los estudios que se vienen realizando principalmente, como dijo Kai, son de determinar dónde se encuentra la especie. Raramente se le había observado en el pasado. Y yo en lo personal, que he tenido la oportunidad de estar en alguno de esos países y en el campo, nunca pude ver un individuo en vida silvestre. Sí los he visto en zoológicos y ahí hago otra vez el comentario de la boca o de lo largo del hocico o angosto. Entonces, lo que nos comentaba Kyle y con su estudiante de doctorado en Sumatra, han estado descubriendo poblaciones nuevas. Y resulta que gran parte de las afectaciones viene por la destrucción del hábitat y principalmente, como nos comentó, están encontrando los individuos en áreas protegidas y están trabajando principalmente en parques nacionales o similares. Una de las cosas interesantes que nos comenta es la captura de un macho de 4 metros o un poquito más. Acuérdense que él comentó que dijo que es una especie que puede llegar a los 5 metros y medio, o sea, estaría entre las 3 más grandes, donde ellos de alguna manera están intentando todos estos individuos que logren capturar, colocarles radios satelitares para conocer mucho más sobre su biología y su comportamiento, porque como comentaba, es muy poco lo que se ha hecho. Es interesante porque hay un grupo formado de investigadores que en su momento se llamaba el Grupo de Trabajo del Tomistoma en el Grupo de Especialistas de Cocodrilos de la UICN, que como comenté yo en la conversación, uno de sus fundadores fue nuestro gran y apreciado amigo que ya no está con nosotros, Ralph Summerland, y tendremos la posibilidad de contener otro episodio con otras personas o otros investigadores que vienen trabajando en pro de la conservación del Tomistoma. Espero que este episodio haya sido de su agrado, que les llame la atención esta especie tan icónica y tan diferente del mundo de los cocodrilos en términos de su morfología, y les deseamos que los próximos pasos en la investigación que ya va llevando Kyle y su equipo de investigadores en el sureste asiático puedan determinar la parte genética como nos comentó en el video. Los invito nuevamente a que se suscriban al canal de YouTube de Río Verde, le den like a nuestros programas, reciban la información de todos aquellos que están saliendo nuevos y aquellos que puedan apoyarnos vengan a patreon.com, en la cual podrán apoyarnos financieramente. Otra de las cosas interesantes dentro del trabajo de Kyle, los invito a ver, aquí abajo les vamos a colocar las páginas web de Kyle, donde se muestra gran parte del trabajo que viene realizando, no solamente con el Tomistoma, sino con la fauna en general. Los invitamos a que los visiten y tengan un poquito más de idea de este trabajo tan maravilloso que nos explicó en esta amena conversación que tuvimos. Se despide Álvaro Velasco.